And so it goes on. We've created a very complex global society, including huge cities which run upon pumping petroleum out of the ground. Petroleum is a limited resource, as you may know, and not only are we using it up, using more of it all the time, but there are more and more people wanting to participate in that. Third world countries which didn't used to be so reliant on petroleum are wanting to imitate the more so-called developed world. So these are multiple paradigms. We can also talk about the polarization of different kinds of fundamentalism in the world, different belief systems set against each other, each armed with weapons of mass destruction. There are multiple paradigms which give us cause for concern. Each in its own way is indicative of a mindset which is not sustainable. Do you see what I mean? Like, treating the planet the way we've been treating it is not sustainable. We can't keep doing that. At some point, we're going to run out of options. Pumping petroleum out of the ground and using it for transportation, we can't keep doing that forever. You see, there's a limited, the clock is ticking. We have to find alternatives. Do you see what I'm saying? Each of these paradigms we can't keep doing forever. Now, it may seem like when you look at these things, it may be quite depressing. If you look at the news, I mean, just about whatever the news is about, you go like, oh no, you know. And even if you don't do that for yourself, even if you feel like you've led a good life and you've had a good joyride, and you know, nevertheless, how many of us tonight have children? How many have grandchildren? Okay, how many have seen a child? What?
How many care? How many are children?
So, if you had a choice about it, even if it's not for yourself, how many of us would really much prefer that this planet remain sustainable for future generations, for your own children?
Yes.
Okay, so you put a strong vote into creating a sustainable future. Now, all of these different paradigms I've mentioned, like global warming and peak oil and so on, all of these different paradigms really seem to have in common is that they have no solution. If we had a solution to global warming, we would be doing something about it right now. If we had an immediate solution to peak oil, an alternative energy, we'd probably be using it. All of these things really have in common on the surface is that we have no solution to them. But they have something else in common too. Because every single one of the problems that faces us, either collectively as a race or individually in our personal lives, was created out of what we've come to regard as the default state of human consciousness. Albert Einstein, years ago, he made a wonderful statement which we could be well advised to tattoo on our arms. Albert Einstein said, "You cannot solve any problem in the same state of consciousness in which it was created." You cannot, isn't that great? You cannot solve any problem in the same state of consciousness in which it was created. Let's look at how that works in our day-to-day life. How many of us in the last weeks or months have had a really kind of impassioned argument with somebody close to you about a small practical detail, like how to stack the dishwasher or taking out the garbage or something? How many of us have got really... Now come on, the people who raise their hands were the truthful ones. Or with a co-worker about, something. But how many of us have entered into an argument about something which in the bigger picture is not that important? Let me see. And how many of us have perhaps then had a good night's sleep or had a weekend off or a meditation or something, and you go back to that same problem and you realize, what was I so upset about? What does this actually matter? And you realize that your connection with that person is much more important than being right about the problem. Who's had that experience? You see? That is an example of what Albert Einstein said, you see. You don't solve the problem in terms of the problem. You solve the problem by shifting to another state of consciousness, a more expansive state of consciousness, a more loving state of consciousness, in which the problem is not solved, it disappears, and you find solutions at a higher level of integration. There have been many, many examples of this in science, in politics, in economics, where you reach a state of deadlock. You can't evolve that system any further, and instead of pushing further within the system, the chaos creates a higher level of integration. We are now collectively have reached a point where the dominant state of consciousness, which has created all of these situations we've described, is no longer sustainable. As a basic necessity for survival, humanity has to evolve now to a higher level of integration of consciousness. And the good news is it's happening already. Look what we've seen in the room tonight. So, what is the dominant state of human consciousness? If you look at the newspaper reports, if you look at the world, what has dominated human consciousness, at least in our, as far as we can see? Yes?
Fear.
Fear. Okay, what else? Fear, negativity. Separation. In other words, the opposite of what we just experienced together. Separation means the innate assumption that the source of thought in you is different from the source of thought in me. In other words, what is experiencing reality from you and from me is different. That's called separation, isn't it? If you experience separation in your personal life, if you experience separation with your husband or your wife or your boyfriend or your girlfriend, what is the relationship going to look like if you meet in a strong assumption that we are different? Conflict. The best you can hope for is a negotiation between two separate entities to try and get your needs met in a kind of a contract. And strangely enough, for many of us, that is what a marriage has amounted to. I'll make you feel good about yourself, I'll give you security, I'll help you get your needs met if you do the same for me. With a child, if you are a parent, you raise a child. If you raise the child with the assumption, the unquestioned assumption of separation, what is parenting going to look like? Control. Inevitably, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're going to try and mold that child in a certain way, either to make the child more like you, or if you don't like yourself very much, you're going to try and make the child less like you. But one way or the other, you're going to try and steer the child, to mold the child in a certain direction. In a neighborhood, if you live on a street with other families in their houses, with the innate assumption that they are different than me, what is that street going to look like? Competition. Who's got the greener lawn? Gossip, backbiting.